The NFC and AFC championship games are set. What does it all mean? Who's going to win? But most importantly, how do we get here? We have tons to react to, and we will do it all right now because it is time for Sunday Night Blitz. Welcome to Sunday Night Blitz, presented by Prime. I'm Jason Fitz. He's Frank Schwab, the Yahoo Sports NFL extraordinary, just expert extraordinary. We're going to put you in all things expertise, Frank, because I'm in a great mood. I'm in a great mood because you and I were texting over the course of the weekend saying, my God, are we actually going to get a good game? And as we come here right now, we're going to break all the games down. We're going to break down some of the coaching action. We got a ton to get to over the course of this show. But Frank, it was just nice to watch a really good football game. Like, I found myself pacing in the living room for two teams that I don't care about at all, just watching great football, which is a reminder of how awesome this weekend can actually be.
Yeah. I mean, when I texted you that, it was right after the Ravens game, and we were 1 of 7 at that point for good games. Like, it was just like, great, another blowout. And then obviously 49ers was really compelling. I thought the Lions win was good. I mean, even though the Lions were up 14 late in the fourth quarter, still a good game. And then just a classic, Bills Chiefs. So we'll get to that. Heartbreak. Oh my goodness. But yes, the divisional round weekend absolutely delivered. Great storylines, a few great games. And this is why so many people love this weekend.
When the NFL can give us what they gave us tonight with the Bills and the Chiefs, it's a reminder of why so many people are just flat out addicted to this sport. Like the adrenaline, the crowd, the plays, the stars. When you watch, and I won't even say it was beautiful football throughout, but when you watch two teams that are at the stage these two teams are at, battle like this, man, I get it. And sometimes I think with what you and I do and what so many of us do in this world, like, it's easy to get cold and callous to this. I watched tonight's game with the Bills and the Chiefs, and I just kept thinking, like, this is the epitome. This is the height. Like, we might get some other great matchups, but we're not going to get anything, I don't think, that has that same level of connective drama throughout the rest of the playoffs, including the Super Bowl, is what we just got.
It's going to be hard. It's going to be hard to top that one. I mean, you just think about the is tragedy too much to say for the Bills? I mean, it's going to be hard to replicate that storyline unless Lions losing a Super Bowl like that or something. I mean, just it is. It's Mahomes and Allen. You got these two titans right now, the quarterback position battling. They have their history. It's almost becoming a minor Cowboys 49ers type of rivalry where we're just getting good games from these teams every time they hook up. And yeah, for the Bills to lose the way they did, like you said earlier, there's two teams I really like. I don't have any affinity for the Chiefs or Bills. I was rooting for the Bills because I like new blood. I like new champions. But at the same time, you're just like tense. You're on the edge of your seat. I can only imagine. Like, they were showing people in the stands crying in Buffalo, and I feel that. You know what the NFL, what NFL football means to people. It could just be summarized in some of the fan reactions we saw around the league this week, good and bad.
Is it too soon to say wide right is just going to be a phrase that never wants to be heard in Buffalo? Okay. Let's do this in a way for the people, Frank, because we're all about the people here. Let's go through the Saturday games and then get to the Sunday games. Right? It feels like the right way to do it. So we start with this whole thing, the appetizer of it all. Like, someday, maybe the Texans will get lucky and not be put in the awful time slot, but they're always in the early one. They were in the early one, and this was a game, though. The Ravens beat the Texans 34-10. It was 10-10 at the half. And I felt like you could feel a little of the rust, right? Like, things weren't quite clicking for the Ravens. And then all of a sudden in the second half, they come out 3 straight drives that lead to touchdowns, absolute domination. Lamar was Lamar, and they ran away with this thing 34-10. We both picked the Ravens. I don't think there was a lot that was shocking to me in this game, but it was still the statement of like, hey, one team, and that team being Baltimore, has just beat the you-know-what out of every good team they've faced this year. When are we going to give that credit?
Yeah, I mean, if they play like they did in the second half, they're winning a Super Bowl. Like that it's a wrap. Like, that was about as good of a half of football as you could play. And we'll get to Lamar in a second. He's awesome, of course. But what really doesn't get enough credit here, or just talked about enough, because when you have an MVP quarterback that doesn't get talked about enough, is their defense is awesome. Like, their defense is so good. And I honestly don't really know how they're doing it, because you look at, in this era, the great defenses have a great pass rusher. You have a Micah Parsons or a TJ Watt or a Myles Garrett. The Ravens don't really have that. And yet they led the NFL in sacks this year. Mike Macdonald, there's a reason this dude is really hot name on the head coaching circuit right now, getting all these interviews because his schemes are just fantastic. And they do have great players. They're awesome at linebacker. Kyle Hamilton, what a steal. We knew that was a steal. The moment they drafted him, everybody was like, oh, we really let the Ravens get this guy, really? And he's become everything we thought he would be coming out of Notre Dame. When you watch him play, you're just like, this kid's going to be a good NFL player. Maybe some teams got scared off by some of the measurables, but he's fantastic. And this Ravens team, to hold the Texans out of the end zone, I mean, their only touchdown was on a punt return. I thought it spoke volumes about who the Ravens are right now. This is a really good, really balanced team. And yes, Lamar, again, we're going to talk about him in a second. It really starts with their defense, though. This defense is elite. It's fantastic. They're going to, Patrick Mahomes coming to town. But I think if I'm the Ravens right now, I go back and look at the tape of that second half and say, we're winning a Super Bowl, guys, because ain't nobody beating us if we play like that again.
Important questions. Do you prefer the Doobie Brothers before or after the addition of Michael McDonald? Because that's every time. That's what I think of first. Go back, listen to Mike. The Doobie Brothers took a big. It's not Peter Cetera with Chicago. Let's just be a music nerd for a minute. Chicago was this weird funk sort of jazzy thing, and then Peter Cetera joins, and all of a sudden they're doing I am the man who will fight. They went to 80s soft rock, right? I get that. Michael McDonald had his own effect on the Doobie Brothers. So. Are we pre or post Michael McDonald on the Doobie Brothers?
Here's the thing, Fitz. I will talk to you about many, many subjects. I will debate you about many subjects. I'll disagree with you on football. But a rule of thumb I have in my life is don't argue about music stuff with a guy who has gold records behind him when I'm talking to him. It's just kind of a thing with me. So whatever you say, I'm just going to nod my head and agree. I
appreciate
you're right about that. Yeah, no problem.
But I also, every time I hear Mike McDonald, also think of Office Space, right? The movie where the guy's named. Okay. This is what I think about, because the guy's going to get a head coaching job, but we're going to have to figure this out, right? Then we're going to
Mike when they brought him in from Michigan, it was he took over for Wink, if I remember right. It's I guess, yeah, that's a pretty good hire. Oh, it's been a grand slam hire. I mean, he was bad. If you remember, the Ravens were pretty bad on defense early last season. They had a lot of injuries, but Tua ripped them for 470 yards or whatever that was, and 6 touchdowns, whatever it was in that comeback. You're I don't know if this is going to work. He might be the best defensive coordinator in the game right now. And because this is not an Ed Reed, Ray Lewis, 2000 Ravens type of defense. They do have good players. I respect their players a lot, but this is a unit. Anytime Devin Singletary touched the ball, 5 dudes were just crushing him behind the line of scrimmage. It was unbelievable.
That's what I want to point to for a second. I was actually talking to Dominique Foxworth earlier today about this very thing. And he said the most surprising thing about the Ravens right now is that they simply don't make mistakes defensively. And he pointed to one particular play. I think most people will remember the triple option sort of moment that was being run. And he said a lot of times when you're facing a defense that pursues hard, you can get them to over pursue or make mistakes. It's what the Texans did beautifully in their game plan against the Browns. They actually got the Browns to sort of get themselves out of alignment. It helped them. The Ravens didn't do that. And that just speaks to how well coached they are. And you're right. That's going to be particularly important in the AFC Championship game because they're taking on Mahomes, and you can spy Mahomes all day long. But at some point, what happens is Mahomes is going to make you make a decision. Are you going to come up and defend him, in which case he just drops the ball over you? Or are you going to stand there and let him go for 8 to 10 to 12 to 15 yards? This Ravens defense is disciplined enough to be able to handle that. I think that's one of the more interesting parts because we'll talk about Lamar all day long, but the Ravens will live and die by this defense.
Yeah, and I mean, this Ravens coaching staff against Andy Reid in that offense, what a just a X's and O's matchup for the AFC Championship game because just fantastic. And the quarterback matchup's awesome too. I will say this, getting to Lamar finally, I was worried in the first half because I hate dumb narratives. I just do. I'm sorry. I hate to even call it be blunt about this, but there are some dumb narratives out there. And you saw it was really heating up of Lamar can't play in the playoffs. This is a different game. And Lamar can't. Come on. He lost a game his rookie year. He didn't play particularly well. Yeah, they lost as a number 1 seed to the Titans. But there wasn't some indictment of Lamar Jackson can never win in the playoffs. We talked about on Thursday at Zero Blitz. John Elway didn't win for a million years, it seemed like, right, until the end. So I'm sitting there in the first half, and he's struggling. He did not start off fast. He had 52 passing yards in the first half. I'm like, oh, my God, I'm going to have to deal with an offseason of just reading all this stuff on Lamar can't win. And then he has a second half where you're like, that's the MVP of the league, and he just was awesome. He just took over that game. He's taken over practically every game this year for a team that I think they still have that streak going, right? They led every single game at the 2-minute warning of the fourth quarter. Like, that's who the Ravens are. This is a great – if they win a Super Bowl this year, Lamar's going to get all of his flowers. And I think the 2023 Ravens are going to get their flowers too as one of the truly dominant champions we've seen in a while.
I mean, Lamar, I pulled up the stat line here. 16-22 for $152 with 2 touchdowns, a perfect passer rating, and then 11 carries for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like, when you just start talking about the way he was the leading rusher in the course of this game, and by the way, the Ravens as a team, 42 rushes for 229 yards. Like, they came out committed to, you're going to have to put resources there. And it's really stunning to watch a team just go out and out-execute everybody. And that's what the Ravens are doing on both sides of the ball. And you're right, at halftime, it felt like Twitter X was just everybody had some hot Lamar take. And it's just a reminder, you got to slow your roll a little bit, because I don't really, there is not a fatal flaw to Lamar's game at all. Like, there isn't but this is the one thing. And this year, I think there's not a fatal flaw to the Ravens, honestly. Like, every single area, they're well coached and they play well. And that's not something we can necessarily say about any of the other teams in the playoffs that are remaining or not. Like, there are fatal flaws, or at least buts or questions everywhere. There aren't for the Ravens anymore. They've answered every question you could have.
I think so. And look, it's the nature of a one-and-done playoffs. They could lose. They could lose to the Chiefs next week. They could lose to either one of the NFC teams in the Super Bowl. It just happens, right? The best team doesn't always win. But if you're sitting here just trying to pick who's going to win the Super Bowl, your answer has to be Baltimore right now, if you're being honest. Like, yeah, San Francisco can catch them on a good day, or even, Mahomes might get them next week. But this, like you said, what is the weakness of the Baltimore Ravens right now? I mean, this team came really, really close to having a 16-1 type of season. And it blew a couple late leads. It's not ideal. But it's a great team. They're not just good; they're great. And great teams lose. So it happens. The 2007 Patriots, they won Super Bowl. Nobody's guaranteed anything. But this Ravens team, like you said, their special teams, they give up the punt return. You don't want to do that, but generally their special teams are awesome. Defense is as well coached as any in the NFL. Lamar is the MVP of the league, and they can just run it down your throat when they need to. John Harbaugh is a fantastic coach who honestly doesn't get his due because he was coaching at the same time as Bill Belichick winning those 6 Super Bowls. There's nothing about, and they're at home next week. There's nothing about this Ravens team that you look at, you say, okay, yeah, I can see them. If they lose, they lose, but it's not because of anything we can pinpoint right now.
Fantastic coach, terrible dancer. I mean, we've all seen the video.
I loved it, man. I loved it. That's the kind of thing that you need. He's keeping the guys loose. It's fun. I love seeing Harbs bust the moves, man. It was great.
Dude,
that's gonna be me. When we go out in Vegas, that's gonna be me. You know that, right?
Yeah, that's exactly. I watched it. I thought, man, neither of us are going to look any better than that at 2 a.m. in Vegas, which is, going to be a real thing. We're just going to have to figure that out. I don't know how I feel about that, but I felt like if Harbaugh can do that in front of a locker room, then I can certainly do that in the club. You mentioned that the best team doesn't always win, and that's why any given Sunday matters. I don't want to say the best team didn't win, but when we get to the Saturday night game, the Packers, by the way, we both took the Ravens, so we both got that one right in our pick competition. You took the points on the Packers. I took the points for the 49ers. I thought the 49ers were going to roll in this game. They did not, and we can say what we want about the weather, but I spent a lot of this game thinking, man, Brock Purdy looks bad. And here's what's happened. Brock Purdy, I think, played like for most of that football game. And then all of a sudden, in the last drive, when you needed it, he was chef's kiss. It was brilliant. It was wonderful. I don't want to make too big a deal of the last drive, and I don't want to make too big a deal of everything that led up to that. But it was, at best, an uneven performance for Purdy.
Absolutely. And there's just something about Deebo Samuel with this offense. I mean, we think about this really, really deep 49ers team, and okay, it's McCaffrey this week, it's Ayuk next week, whatever. But when Deebo is not in the game, they're just a different team. He's that good. Like, he's just such a difference maker for them. He leaves early in this game, and they struggle a lot. I thought the one thing I've never seen, and maybe you have, maybe I'm just missing something. Fox showed a replay of Brock Purdy dropping back, and obviously the rain was affecting him. He started off with a glove. He took off the glove. He missed a lot of passes. He just generally doesn't miss. There's one where in the middle of his drop back, he is wiping off his hand on his leg. I've never seen that before. That led me to believe. I was like, whoa, Brock Purdy is so in his head right now that he can't even function. So all that said, you do have to give him credit for rallying when he had to. There's 5-6 minutes left in the game or whatever, and they needed a score to win that they had a touchdown to win that football game. He got it done, had a great run on, I believe it was 2nd and 10. He gets about 9 yards. It gets him in a position where he can hand the ball to Christian McCaffrey, and he scores game-winning touchdown on the next play. I thought this was it was not a great game for Brock Purdy, but yet it was a great game for Brock Purdy at the end, because for all the questions about, is he just riding the bus? Is he just a guy who's in a great offense with great teammates and a great coach? Well, in these moments, we praise all the other quarterbacks for coming through in the clutch. He came through in the clutch with some huge plays. Chris Conley, I didn't even know Chris Conley was still in the league. He's completed passes of him on that last drive. Like, credit to Brock Purdy for, look, wasn't pretty, but when chips were all on the table, he came through for them, and I tip my cap.
Yeah, this is the interesting thing with Purdy. He missed so many easy throws. I think you're right. He was in his own head. But the one thing he didn't do was turn the ball over. And look, I'm not going to necessarily blame the last interception for Jordan Love, but one interesting note, every single quarterback that won this weekend in all the games, if you add all of them up, the total number of interceptions thrown by winning quarterbacks this weekend, total as a group, is 0. Not a single quarterback that won this weekend threw an interception. And at some point, for everything that went wrong for Brock, he didn't turn the ball over. A couple of times I thought he should. Like, a couple of those, it was like, what in the hell? Like, it was a weird game. But as good as Jordan Love was, and I thought Jordan Love was really delightful at times in this game. I've been tough on Jordan Love. I've been measured, let's say that. I haven't really been one to turn around and be like, oh my God, Jordan. I thought Jordan Love was great in this game. I thought Aaron Jones was great. I thought Aaron Jones was, frankly, better in this game than Christian McCaffrey. I walked away from this game saying, Debo is the MVP of the 49ers, not Christian McCaffrey, not Brock Purdy. Because you're right, without Debo, they look like a shell of themselves. They need a healthy Debo if they intend to win the Super Bowl. But on the other side of it, I just looked at the Packers and I thought, man, this is a hell of a foundation moving forward. Like, this just looks like a team that's built to win for a very long time, and a team that looks like they made every right decision.
I mean, they had just crushed the draft a couple straight years. I mean, that I remember when the New Orleans Saints about 7-8 years ago, the Kamara draft, they just absolutely crushed it, and it changed the trajectory of their team for 5 years. And that's the same kind of thing that happened with the Packers with these two draft classes. They're just overloaded with good young talent. This is a team that should feel really, really good about itself. They should have won this game. And one thing that I really question about the Packers is, look, their rookie kicker, it just wasn't good this year, and yet they stuck it out with him, Anders Carlson. And even during the broadcast, they said, we talked to Matt LaFleur about this, and he said, we just got to see this thing through. You don't just see this thing through. When you have a kicker who's missed a kick in 10 of your last 12 games, and then it comes back to bite them. And you kind of knew it would. When they tried to Carlson out for that kick that was going to put them up 7 late, it's like, this kid's shaky, and I don't know if he's going to make this in the rain. And he sure didn't. And that ends up being the difference in their loss. So I thought they were a little too passive about that. I mean, hey, sometimes you got to, feelings can't get in the way. Like, I thought the same thing about the Bills and their punter situation with Sam Martin. Like, I'm sorry, Sam Martin gets deactivated for a playoff game, but he can't kick. He's got a hamstring injury. Anders Carlson has a yips right now. He's not making a field goal when you need to make it. So I thought that was something that came back and bit the Packers. But overall,
and by the way, let me just add one thing to that's interesting, because Anders' brother is Daniel Carlson, the kicker for my beloved Raiders. A lot of people will forget that Daniel Carlson was drafted higher than people thought you would usually draft a kicker by the Vikings. And he was cut because he missed so many kicks his first year, right? So, like, he was a disaster his first year as a kicker, and he's turned into a very good one. I kept watching that thinking, man, what the hell happens for some of these guys coming into the pros where it isn't right? And I don't know what clicked for Daniel Carlson. He's turned into a great kicker for the Raiders. I don't know if it can also click for Anders Carlson. But I watched this and I thought, to your point, you aren't helping the kid putting him out there. Like, if you're telling the broadcast crew that you pray every time he comes out, he knows that. He feels that. And what's that put on him, right? Like, this is a disaster. You can't put your kicker in that situation, and you can't trust him. And to your point, no kicker in the NFL, when you include extra points, no kicker in the league missed more kicks this year than he did, and you needed him at the end of the game. Those are the moments that, as an organization, you got to look in the mirror and say, one one kick is not the reason you lose a football game. But why was that kicker still on this roster in that position to make that kick when he's done so much so poorly for so long this year?
Right, and I'm not even saying cut him, but you have 53 roster spots for a reason. You need to deactivate him on game day and say, look,
practice
kid,
squad him or something.
We'll come back to it next year. You're going to be fine. We're all good. But right now, we're in the playoffs, so we can't afford a missed kick with 6 minutes left to go in the game at San Francisco when we're looking at an upset. But like to your point, that's not the reason they lost. But I think that this Packers team, a tough loss, really, they have to feel like they should have won that game. But yet they'll come back next season feeling really, really good about themselves. You have a good offseason. You can go win that division from the Lions. The future is very, very bright for the Packers.
Are we concerned at this point about the 49ers moving forward? Because,
I
think
a little bit.
Right. They got the bye week. That didn't help them. After the bye week, they take on a Packers team that, like, look, nobody's sleeping on the Packers after what they did to the Cowboys in Dallas, right? So, like, that had to sharpen your edges. It was the Packers on a short week, so you had all of these different advantages. You had advantage after advantage after advantage, and you couldn't do anything with any of it? Like, I don't know. I walked away from that from a San Francisco standpoint saying this was an uninspired effort by the 49ers. They get the win. They survive. But, man, you can't tell me that the 49ers in a win feel like they have the same momentum as the Lions, who we'll get to later, also having their win. Like, this was a broken version of the 49ers in this game to me.
Looked very beatable. I mean, and that's the only way you can put it. Now, maybe we'll look back and be like, that's the one bullet they dodged on their way to a Super Bowl title. We both agree they have that upside, right? But I just was watching that game. Like, this team is, even though they escaped, they look really vulnerable. They look beatable. They don't look like that invincible team coming into that Christmas game against the Ravens, right? The Ravens beat them pretty bad. It looked like the much better team. The Packers outplayed them, I thought. I think we both agree with that. And they escaped with a win, and great. And maybe they go on and win 2 more games in the Super Bowl. They could. But I have a lot more questions about the 49ers right now than I did before kickoff against the Packers. If you're the Detroit Lions, you're going to look at the tape early this week, and you're going to say, we can beat this team. Now, maybe they won't. It's still a tough assignment going on around San Francisco, right? But I don't know if I'm the Detroit Lions, if I'm nervous, if I'm scared. I said, yeah, we can go in and win this game. Why not?
And now I took the 49ers at favored by 9.5. You took Green Bay, the points there, which means you got this one right, dude. I just want to say that.
Rare, yeah.
At this point, you are now ahead. You are 2-0 for the Saturday action, and I am 1-1. But we're just getting started on the show because for all the Saturday action, Saturday was like, do you have what's Frank Schwab's favorite appetizer at Chili's? Like, is there like, because let's face it, Chili's is a delight. Any restaurant you want to go to is like, are you like a chips and salsa guy? Or are we like a spin dip guy? Like, what?
I almost hate chips and salsa because you put those in front of me, I'm just, don't bring any more, please. I feel like I got to tap out and stuff, but they just keep bringing them, and I just keep eating those chips because they're so good. Yeah.
No, so that's what Saturday was. Saturday was chips and salsa. You didn't really need them. You didn't even know if you wanted them, but you consumed them because it was there, and you just couldn't stop. You couldn't stop. You couldn't stop. When we come back, we'll get to the actual meat and potatoes because for everything the Saturday action was, the Sunday action was even better, and it has long-term ramifications to the entire league based on one thing. We'll tell you about it next. All right, let's get into the Sunday games because everything the Saturday games could do, the Sunday games could do better. Like anything they could do better. All right, so Sunday games started with the Lions and the Bucs. And I want to tell you something. Every time I see the Lions play at home, like I feel like right now, if you live within like a 10-hour radius of Detroit, you should get in your car and you should just drive up to Ford Field like for next weekend for the watch party. Because there are some places, we were talking about the club earlier in Vegas. There's some clubs that you're like, I got to go. Like whatever the Lions are doing in their home game atmosphere, Frank, I had goosebumps.
Oh.
I absolutely, from the kickoff,
I
had, and I thought this was key. I thought this was huge. You mentioned earlier that, it seemed like Purdy was in his own head. When the broadcast pointed out that Goff talked about hearing his name being chanted and how it actually relaxed him, I think some guys just need to feel like they're valued. And that crowd, 3 hours before kickoff, was chanting his name, chanting Jared Goff's name, a quarterback everybody was ready to give up on. It just speaks to the magic of this Lions team and why I think they have a shot to be one of the best stories, not just in the NFL, but in all of sports that we've seen in the last 10 years.
Yeah, we've talked about it, and I thought the moment, kind of the image from the playoffs so far, maybe this entire season. Aiden Hutchinson on the sideline after the game is over, and the celebrations just going crazy around him, and him, a homegrown kid, somehow gets drafted number 2 by the Lions. Good job, Jaguars. You really screwed that one up. He's just sitting there taking it in and just looking around. You could tell it was a moment for him, and it's a moment for Michigan. And it's just, like you said, goosebumps everywhere. If you are, especially with the Bills out now, if you are not rooting for the Detroit Lions right now, like, what are you even doing? Like, unless you are a Ravens, Chiefs, or 49ers fan, everybody should be on this Lions bandwagon. And they were in trouble in this game. I thought Tampa Bay had a shot at an upset. I felt pretty good about that. They outplayed them in the first half. They played really well in the first half. Baker was cooking a little bit. And then, it just, in the fourth quarter, look, this Lions team has every right to feel all this pressure of, we've never done this before. We're the same old Lions. They haven't been in that spot many times. But in the fourth quarter, I thought they were really in command. I mean, Jahmyr Gibbs, look, me, like a lot of people, said, you can't draft a running back number 12. That's crazy. Well, okay, Jahmyr Gibbs has one of the ankle-breaking runs of the season. It puts Antoine Winfield, an all-pro great safety, in the dust to score there. Amon-Ra St. Brown makes a great play on 3rd and 15 after that and scores a touchdown at the end of that drive. And they kind of took over that game. It was close at the end, but this Bucs team doesn't quit. This was a good quality win for the Lions, I think. This Buccaneers team was a little underrated coming into playoffs. I thought they were peaking. The Lions to get this win, all the pressure they're under. Look, it's great to have the crowd behind you, right, Fitz? But there's also pressure that goes along with that. There's that 89-year-old man in the stands who's been a season ticket holder for 60 years, who just wants to see this team win one Super Bowl in his lifetime. Like that, you feel that, right? Like
That's
Buffalo
real.
felt that. We'll talk about that. And they came through and it mattered. And I was really, really impressed with the way they won this game.
So before I give my Lions thoughts here, let's stick with the Buccaneers for a second. Because 2 things can be true. The Lions get a great win, but I want to acknowledge something with Tampa Bay. Todd Bowles has done not a good job. Todd Bowles has done a great job. And Baker Mayfield is clearly the future for them. And the future, not in a bargain basement. Like, I'm not saying Baker Mayfield's going to go get a top 10 contract. But I think what we're going to see now is the Bucs make a long-term commitment to Baker Mayfield that is appropriate for a quarterback that's going to give them a chance to win week in and week out. And yeah, they have been inconsistent at times this year. I think that's a fair thing to say. And I was hard on that Week 18 win against Carolina. I thought they looked like trash in that football game. But what you saw today from Baker, like the number of times the pocket was collapsing around him, he didn't have anywhere to set his feet. Like, we always hear about footwork from a quarterback, and you were seeing him just wherever he could flop a leg while he's just chucking a ball downfield. It was incredible. And he took hits that most guys don't take and get up from. And I just felt like, even in the beginning, the first interception in this game for the Baker threw, it was a great throw. Just went off the hands of the receiver, and all of a sudden you have the pick, right? It's just, I think Baker Mayfield, and this is one of the themes of some of these teams, like, there were quarterbacks that played so well in the process of losing that you still look at it and say, hey, we got hope. And Baker's one of them. So I just think we need to take everything we've ever thought about Baker Mayfield, crumple it up, throw it away, and reanalyze Baker Mayfield for who he is today with this team, with this organization, because I think he can be very Goff-like in the long term. They can build around him in a way that they can win at the highest level.
I think it's a good comparison with Goff. Obviously, both number 1 overall picks, but it's kind of, the Buccaneers took on the personality of Baker Mayfield, which I think is important. Look, I mean, if you want your quarterback, it doesn't always happen where your quarterback's a leader. You don't always need it, even really, but it's always good when the persona of your team is your quarterback, and he's a tough dude. He came into the playoffs beat up. I mean, you could tell in the last couple of weeks he was dealing with a lot of injuries. He was on the injury report, but he really, I thought, played well into playoffs. Enough to your point. Tampa Bay is going to franchise him if they don't get a long-term deal done. I think they're going to get a long-term deal done because it just fits right now. This is something you need to see through. Where's Baker going? He's still a young guy. He's still got the pedigree of a number 1 overall pick. He did play well as a rookie in Cleveland, and that other playoff year they had in Cleveland, you definitely had to see this through. And yeah, like to your point, I mean, Mayfield, look, yeah, that interception, if you're putting that on him, look, Mike Evans just dropped it. Like, he's a great player. I love Mike Evans, but he dropped it. You can't do that in a playoff game. And then right after that, Jamel Dean, oh my goodness. Oh, that pass that from Goff is right in his hands. And that's the difference between winning and losing a playoff game. Like,
yep.
Those Mike Evans catches the one, Jamel Dean catches that one. We're having a much different conversation right now about this game, I think.
Now, the one thing I want to say about the Lions, and I think this is important overall, at every turn, they've been in some way disrespected. Like Dan Campbell was made a laughing stock for the way he handled his press conference. Nobody believed in him. I went back and looked at several publications the year he was hired, and he was ranked by every single one as the worst hire in the coaching cycle, right? The worst by every single one. And look at where he is now. Look at how beloved he's become now. Jared Goff is somebody that everybody said, oh, no, it was McVay. McVay made him great. He's trash. He's no good. Nobody was excited when Goff went to the Lions. We see what he's become. The draft class last year was mocked by so many people. The Lions have managed to shut out the noise and simply do what they think is best for their organization at every step. And now they look smart. And that's just... I think there's a lesson for every bad team, for every team that's trying to figure it out, for every team that's stuck somewhere. There's a lesson. At some point, you got to make the moves you believe in, and you got to shut all the noise out, and you got to be patient, and you got to create a culture where everybody is fighting for each other. And there is this sort of moment with the Lions where it feels like, hey, all of this disbelief everybody has fueled us. And I know that's common in a lot of locker rooms, but in this locker room specifically, so many people have had something to say in a negative way about all of these players and the way the thing was built and how it came together. For it to be where it is right now is a massive up yours to everybody that had something to say, but it's also a massive lesson to every team that's trying to figure out how to fix their culture. Because I think the Lions have hit a home run.
Think about how hard this was for Dan Campbell. And I'm just being serious here. He's never been a full-time head coach before. He had an interim tag for a while. I think it was with Miami, right? He comes in. He has no credentials. He comes to a team that had won one playoff game since 1957, had recently gone 0-16, semi-recently. How do you build a culture? And then your first year, you start off 0-10-1, I believe it was. Your second year, you start off, 1-6, 1-7, whatever it was before they rallied. For him to be where he is now, you said the word culture. Dan Campbell's built a culture. Like of anybody in the NFL, there is a culture with the Detroit Lions right now. They believe everything he's doing. He has this aggressive foot on the gas pedal all the time. One of the key plays in this game, touchdown on a fourth down when they went for it. And you knew Dan Campbell was going to go for it because that's who he is. That's who his Lions team is. They bought completely into him when there was no reason to buy into him when he got the job, a year into the job, a year and a half into the job. But right now, Dan Campbell has built a culture with a team, with a franchise that had no history of anything good, unless you're going back to Bobby Lane in 1957, right? It's impressive to me, not just Dan Campbell game-to-game coaching and winning games and all that. He has set the Detroit Lions up to be a winner. As crazy as that sounds coming out of my mouth, Dan Campbell's going to be there a while, and boy, he's 2 wins away from him never having to buy a meal again in Michigan. I mean, he would be as much of a rock star as anybody has been anywhere. Like it's really, really impressive what Dan Campbell's done.
Well, and there's an element to one of the players that was being interviewed right after the game was asked about Campbell and just started going on about how he's authentic and he's real and he's the same every day with everybody and he's relatable and all these things. Like there is a new style of head coach in the NFL that is that. And every former player I've interviewed or talked to or worked with in my career that I've ever talked to about coaches will tell you that the ones that they love the most, the ones that they play the hardest the most for, or they play the hardest for, are the ones that they felt like got them as human beings. And Dan Campbell obviously does that with this particular locker room. So I just think watching the emotion of the players afterwards and Goff being interviewed and saying, look, nobody's leaving this stadium and feeling that. Like there's something special to this moment. I genuinely believe in a league that doesn't need great stories because we watch no matter what. There is no better story the NFL could have in recent memory than somehow, some way, the Lions ending up in Vegas in the Super Bowl. That is the absolute, oh my God moment that the NFL's got to be looking at and saying, hey, if the script writers could make that happen, we wouldn't be mad about it.
What you think? I mean, we're going to talk about this more on Thursday, but as you sit here right now, you think the Lions can go in there and win?
If San Francisco plays the way that they played last weekend, they won't beat this Lions team. This Lions team is every bit as explosive offensively as San Francisco can be. So now it's going to be who can step up. Now, I think the Lions defense has some real issues, and I think they could get carved up, but not if Brock Purdy doesn't play better. And maybe it was the rain, maybe it was the elements, but I don't think Brock Purdy can get away with being who he was for 3.5 quarters and beat this Lions team. Because let me tell you, you mentioned the Lions have never been here. Remember the one guy that has. Because Goff's got a big old Super Bowl experience, right? Like Goff can turn around and say, hey, I've been here. I know exactly what this moment is like. And he played
the freaking Superdome. The Superdome, 140 decibels, right? Like he beat the Saints in that game. Yeah, I agree with you there. That's a good point.
I feel like Goff has played so well over the last few weeks. Like a quarterback with that level of heat, I don't want to bet against him. We'll have time to bet. By the way, speaking of betting on this one, I took Detroit with the 6.5. You took Tampa Bay.
Make the 2-point conversion, Tampa Bay. I was like,
amazing.
Honestly, when you're watching games, the math and stuff, and they're driving down. I'm like, I even tweeted it. I'm like, Todd Bowles, the type of coach that's going to go for 2 here? Because, the analytics thing is taking over, and you should go for 2, and you score, you're down 14. And I didn't think Todd Bowles would do it, but when they lined up for 2, I'm like, I got it. And then, I just Baker throws it, basically into coverage, and Mike Evans doesn't get it. And that's the difference. That's the difference between you winning that one and me losing it. Yeah.
By the way, while everybody's screaming about the analytics on that, can we scream about the play call? Like I just didn't like anything about the play.
There's so many times, Fitz, where it's like we're talking about the wrong thing. You could make a great call. Let's go for it on 4th down. You run up the middle and get nothing. It's like, well, what the decision was fine, but where's the play call? Say that. Yeah, I was like, that's your play? Really? That's your 2-point play? Okay.
So right. we're now dead even at this one. We both are 2-1 at this point. So I feel like it's
spoiler alert. How will this turn out? I don't know, Fitz. What are you teasing here?
It's all going to come down. So this one, the game of the night, the game of the century, the game of the millennium, the game of the best game in the history of the universe of football, whatever the Chiefs-Bills turns out to be every year, it always lives up to the hype. Like Chiefs-Bills is the annual sit down, pop the popcorn, shut everything off, and just watch football at its most beautiful. Because there's something about these two teams that is so electrifying. But I'm going to tell you, Frank, and this is what I mentioned, I alluded to this earlier. There are long-term ramifications to this outcome because the Chiefs go in and they beat Buffalo in Buffalo. And at this point, if you're Buffalo, you now have to look in the mirror and ask yourself, if not now, then when and why? Like Josh Allen, every time these teams have played, Josh Allen has brought it. So now you got to look in the mirror and you got to ask myself, if my superhuman quarterback is going to be superhuman against this team and we're still going to come up short, what's going to change? I don't think the Bills can run it back. They've got to figure out what is going to change defensively. They've got to figure out what's going to change in their play calling. They've got to find more variance to their offense. Like the Bills have long-term ramifications to this loss because this is a game they should have won in Buffalo that they couldn't get done.
Yeah, it's going to be a long off season in Buffalo. And I look at it this way, and I always have with this Bills team. Like, I grew up in Wisconsin, so I'm very familiar with Green Bay and what that market is like, what that culture is like in Green Bay, where the Packers are the story 365 days out of the year. Like, even when the Bucs won an NBA championship, probably some people are worried about who the training camp roster is going to be for the Packers, right? Like, it's just, that's the way that area works. It's life. You're right. It's bigger than football. You have no idea if you've never lived in a market like that, what it is like every single day being a Packers player, coach, whatever. Same with the Bills. I've never lived in Buffalo, but I know, like, I understand, no Bills fans. It is an everyday thing with the Bills. So when they're sitting there and it's a 4th quarter and you're trailing Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, the pressure of all 365 of those days is coming down to just a couple minutes and legacies. And can we finally get to a Super Bowl? And you want to make the big play, but you're so consumed by paralyzed almost by the pressure, I think. I think that's one reason Tyler Bass missed. I think that's one reason Josh Allen on 2nd and 3rd down right before the Bass miss, he's not going underneath trying to get a 1st down. He's going for the home run, and he misses a guy at 2nd down, by the way.
Stephon Diggs was so open cutting across the middle. Like, he was your best receiver is right there in a way that you could have made it a manageable down and distance for the next play. And you heave it into the end zone. Like, he got stepped on by the lineman, couldn't follow through with the throw, whatever. But Diggs was right there, wide open to at least get you 5 or 6 of those 9 yards you needed on that play.
And Diggs himself drops that long pass. That hits him in the hands. He's one of the best receivers in the NFL, but I just think the pressure got to the Bills. And I think it gets worse as you go on because he just, as the Super Bowl window closed. Like you said, these opportunities aren't forever. The Miami Dolphins might have a great offseason and be a 14-3 type of team next year. Whatever it's going to be. Josh Allen might tear an ACL someday. You're not guaranteed to be in this spot at home against the Chiefs in a divisional round game where you haven't lost since mid-November. You've basically been playing playoff games for 2 months, and you ran the table to win the AFC East. And for them to lose the way they did was just heartbreaking. It is gutting. You look at the reactions of the fans in the stands. They kept showing the one guy crying, and I felt for him because it's life there. I get it. I'm from a football crazy place where football is life. And for Bills fans, football is life in that area. And now you're going to wake up tomorrow morning and be going to work and, 3 feet of snow and it's going to be 10 degrees outside. You're just going to be like, oh my God, we're never going to get this done. You just have this hopeless feeling, I'm sure, that you're never going to see a Super Bowl in your lifetime. And not that that's just, by the time we get to August, they'll fire themselves out. Josh Allen's the MVP, blah, blah, blah. But as they sit right now, what a long offseason coming for the Bills. And I just feel so bad for them and their fans.
There's this moment where it's a Sunday night game in brutally cold weather at home in one of the most just electric atmospheres you could ever imagine in Buffalo. He got fans throwing snowballs at players while they're running routes in the end zone, which I'm surprised nobody turned around and made an issue of. You've got everything you could possibly want, and your next level quarterback played lights out. I mean, that's a big part of this. Josh Allen did everything he could do, but my God, there was just there was no semblance of rhythm to the offense. I hated in the fourth quarter, you run a fake punt in your own territory.
Oh my goodness.
If you're going to do that, then keep Josh Allen on the field.
Keep Josh Allen on the field. The Chiefs were not fooled by this at all. Like, they were like, okay, yeah, good one, Sean. Great. Yeah, we got this. And it was,
and then you get the miracle after that of the fumble into the end zone. You get the miracle of the fumble, the worst rule in the NFL. And all of a sudden, now you put this long drive together, this long drive that's going to end the game. And like I said, you miss the fact you miss Diggs deep, but you miss the fact that you've got Diggs crossing over the middle and what would have been an easy, at least it would have made for a 3rd or 4th and short, right? It would have made for short. Instead, you're stuck in this situation where you got to kick a field goal. And Jay Feely, who is commenting on the game, is the kicking expert, has been saying since before the game started, you cannot rely on the kickers in this wind. Who didn't see this coming? Like, you had to know that this was going to be a possibility. And then all of a sudden, bam, everything is lost. You lost at home in this atmosphere when your quarterback did everything he had to do, when you've got one of the best wide receivers in the league. I know you have a decimated defense, but man, also this version of the Chiefs wasn't supposed to be good enough, right?
Right.
This isn't the Chiefs of old. Even Rashee Rice was limping around half the game. Like, he was hurt. And they still managed to get this done. Like, this of all the losses, all the heartbreaking ways to lose, the little things add up to make this the most disastrous of all the losses to the Chiefs. Even worse than 12 seconds. This is a disaster because everything was
13 seconds. It's not worse than that one. That one's what you're dreaming about as you go to sleep. Like, oh my God.
It doesn't hurt worse. The last 13 seconds hurts more. But the bricks were stacked the right way for you in this one. This wasn't a miracle in Arrowhead that nobody will ever be able to explain. This was you flat out failing at home, and that's the inexcusable part.
Absolutely. And even Tyler Bass is an 85% kicker in his career. He's really good. He's kicking for 44 yards. Like, wind or not, you're right. You can't rely on that, but you still expect Tyler Bass, an 85% kicker, is going to make a 44-yarder at the end, wind or not, and he just doesn't. And it's just, but I do think, we've spent all this time, with the Bills, the Chiefs, man. It is one of the most remarkable things you're ever going to hear is that Patrick Mahomes has been their starter 6 years, and 6 times they've gone to the AFC Championship game. Like, that's unbelievable. What a absolute force he is. He was great in this game. Like, we've talked about all season on this show. This is not a great Chiefs team. It's good. They're fine, But this is not a great Chiefs team. And for them to find a way to go on the road and win at Buffalo, to go to another AFC championship game, and we can't even cross them off yet against the Ravens. I know the Ravens look great, but I'm sorry, it's Andy Reid and it's Patrick Mahomes. I'm not sitting here saying they can't win. I'm not saying they're going to go to Baltimore and get boat race. Like, not that duo. This is an unbelievable run by the Chiefs. This was a great win by the Chiefs. They played not a perfect game, but they were really, really good in this game. And for all of the mistakes the Bills made, the Chiefs really, they won this game. Like, they did too. Give them credit because they were really good in a really tough environment.
I think that's an important, part of the reason as we look at the draft every year for everybody, part of the reason teams will desperately try to acquire a quarterback is because we live in a Mahomes world. And I always say this, but it's not just Mahomes. It's Mahomes and Andy Reid together. Like, you have, I think, one of the best coaches we'll ever see in the NFL with one of the best quarterbacks we'll ever see in the NFL. And now, if you don't have that, you ain't going to win. Like, at the highest, like, look at what we've seen from Kansas City this year. And over the course of the entire season, the offensive line at times hasn't been good enough. The defense has had a couple of games where they struggle to stop the run. They've been better for the most part, but they've had a couple of moments. The offense has felt like it's out of rhythm. And midway through the season, it was, this whole thing's broken. And now they're right back in the AFC Championship game. And I could see them winning a Super Bowl as easy as anything. Right? So it just is a reminder of why teams are desperate to get somebody. When look at the quarterbacks that are left. I mean, Lamar Jackson can beat you how many different ways, right? Like, we know that. Like, it's up and down. Lamar can beat you a million different ways. We just watched Josh Allen can beat you a million different ways. We know Mahomes can beat you a million different ways. Like, we see this over and over, especially in the AFC. You want to have a chance, you better have a great quarterback. And the Chiefs are a living, breathing example of when you've got that guy every single year, you might win the Super Bowl.
Yeah, a contender every year. And that's another, getting back to the Bills part of this, that's part of the disheartening thing is the Chiefs aren't going to, I don't think they're going to take a step back next year. They're going to address their problems. They're going to fix a lot of things. This was the time to catch the Chiefs. This was the time to beat them. They were vulnerable. They lost your Raiders at home. They lost to the Broncos this year. This is a beatable Chiefs team. And to your point, even in a quote unquote down year for them, they win the AFC West and they go to the AFC Championship game. Like, if you're the rest of the AFC, you're just like, well, we're fighting for one spot in the AFC Championship game because the Chiefs are just going to be there every single year. Like, there's one spot available. That's how good the Chiefs are right now. And again, I don't know that I'll probably end up picking the Ravens, but I'm scared to death to go against Mahomes. I've done it 2 straight weeks now, and it's foolish both times. Like, this guy is just he's as good as we've ever seen in the NFL. He's just an amazing, amazing player, and it's a great team too.
By the way, credit to chunk plays in this game. One thing that was really interesting, Pacheco, his longest run was 29. Clyde Edwards-Helaire was 28. Mahomes was 24. Travis Kelce had a 29-yard catch. MVS had a 32-yard catch. Rasheed Rice had a 25-yard catch. I mean, there were just times that they carved up large amounts of grass quickly and efficiently. And I want to give Andy Reid all the love in the world for that, because it's not just guys getting open. It's guys being schemed open. And it's something that the Chiefs have done beautifully. They can just gouge you quickly from out of nowhere. So you took Buffalo with the points.
Did I? Do we have proof?
I took Kansas City. It's 2 weeks in a row. 2 weeks in a row. I feel I'd like to thank God, my family, my life coach, my therapist. I'd like to thank the NFL for putting out such a beautiful product. And mostly I'd like to thank Frank for being a good competitor for me. This continues the streak, by the way, Frank. I don't know if you watched FFL, but, I did take down the fantasy football experts in our season-long competition. I am an unstoppable force of winning power. So I just
you are Aiden Hutchinson taking it all in right now. You're just looking around.
Yeah, I'm going to paint the one eye and just stand and listen to 60,000 people scream my name afterwards. So that's what's going to happen. Do want to hit a couple other news pieces that I think are pretty significant. The Raiders, my beloved Raiders, have hired Antonio Pierce since we last talked. And the reason I wanted to bring that up is because I think part of what we've talked about today is seeping into the culture of what we're seeing in coaching hires across the NFL. Dan Campbell is somebody that is not necessarily known for, not to say that he isn't the X's and O's, but that's not what his leadership is built on. And when you talk to players, they talk about the man being as important as anything. I talked to Dominique Foxworth earlier today, as I mentioned, and I asked him a lot about John Harbaugh. And he said one of the coolest things about Harbaugh is that he would walk into the room in a defensive meeting, and he might not even know what you guys were talking about, but you still felt like you could have a talk with him, like you could talk to him, and he got you. It wasn't about the X's and O's of the scheme of the defense. Harbaugh trusted the people he hires to execute that. I think that's an important reminder in modern culture that sometimes that's a coaching approach that works. Antonio Pierce seemed to get the pulse of this locker room last year. Now, will it work long-term? I don't know. But again, I'll remind everybody, Dan Campbell was ranked by most major media outlets as the worst hire in his hiring cycle. Look at where they are now. In fact, if you keep going back through that, Kevin Stefanski was ranked by most media outlets as the worst coach in his hiring cycle. This is a year in and year out thing. And I say that to say, Frank, I don't think we know. I think hiring a coach is about like trying to draft a quarterback. It's a total crapshoot. So if I've had somebody in the building that I trust, and I'm looking around at the current environment of coaches, which is all about guys that get the locker room and can understand everybody, I think that's why this hire makes sense. It doesn't mean it'll be a home run, but I understand it, and that's why I love the hire for the Raiders.
I like it too, because look, if it doesn't work out, this is, and I don't want to just plant the seeds of negativity, but it's not something that sets you back forever. 3 years or 2 years or whatever, if AP doesn't work out, there's going to be another Ben Johnson on the market. There's going to be another, Bobby Slowick. I think the Raiders owed it to themselves to see this thing through. The players responded to him like you never see from an interim coach. Like you've seen interim coaches come in, have some success, players stump for him. Oh, I want this guy. This was Devontae Adams saying, you better hire this guy. This was Max Crosby saying, this isn't our coach, I might want out. Like they loved this guy. Like they wanted to play for this guy. They had some big wins under him. Maybe it's just because the guy he took over from was so bad that the bar was so low that he just looked good in comparison. I don't know. Like you said, we had 9 games. He went 5-4. We don't know if Antonio Pierce is going to be a great coach, but the Raiders, I think, had to see this thing through and see where it goes. Like you said, it's not always about hiring a egghead type coordinator who's got a great offensive scheme. You can find those guys to be your coordinator. Sometimes you need to just be a culture guy. You need to be a Mike Tomlin. You need to be a John Harbaugh, Dan Campbell. Like, again, you're not necessarily calling the plays on Sunday, but you're doing everything else that makes you a successful winning team. And AP right now looks like he might be that kind of guy.
I talked to one former player today who said we always have to remember that at their best, coaches are supposed to be CEOs, which means it doesn't necessarily matter if they're in their office breaking down all of the X's and O's. It matters if they walk through the locker room, can they be a great CEO? And I think we need to remember that in the modern culture particularly. So we'll see how it works. As we have a little bit of fun here, as we look back at this round of the playoffs, there were some amazing performances that delivered teams one step closer to football glory, thanks to our friends at Amazon Prime. We want to single out 2 individuals who really delivered. Frank, get weird with me. Whatever the word delivered means to you, I always love it when you get weird with me. Who delivered the most this weekend?
To me, it's Travis Kelce. Look, we know, great all-time Hall of Fame tight end. He hadn't scored since mid-November. You're starting to wonder, Travis Kelce, is he done? Has he cooked a little bit? He came through 2 touchdowns today. He did the heart emoji to Tay. You saw that, right? That came through. I mean, I love that moment for him. But for Travis Kelce on this stage, he knows that the lights are shining bright. Travis Kelce came through. He had the 2 big scores. You want big players to come up, big-time plays in big-time games. That was Travis Kelce breaking out of his slump, giving some love to Taylor Swift up in the suite. All the respect to Travis Kelce, one of the greats we've ever seen, coming through in a huge, huge win. Who you got, Fitz?
I love that you're right, by the way. Kelce delivered. But when I think deliver, I don't know. You've got the right name, but the wrong first name. I'm going Jason Kelce. Think about this. Think about this. You are days removed from being eliminated, but most importantly, from just stepping away from the game. You are days removed, and you are part of a cultural phenomenon with your brother that I think is going to be bigger than the next Manning cast, right? Like, everybody's going to be paying attention to what the Kelce brothers do next. So what do? Your first weekend off? Oh, instead of being out on the field where it's cold and it's dark and, like, you got to deal with all the conditions, no. You sit in the suite and you party with Taylor Swift. What's better than getting a hit and then giving heart emojis? How about just sitting back and hanging out with Tay-Tay, right? Like, that's the real moment, because you know the cool factor in there. You know how many like famous people are going to be around, famous people are going to be there, you're going to get a ticket connection for life with Taylor that maybe you didn't like. You don't have to go to your brother anymore. You can work your own angle to go to the European concert dates. Come on, Frank. Like, I'm saying, delivered here is making sure that you're supporting your family. Of course, that's important, but you're also delivering for the next chapter in your career while you're hanging out with one of the most famous people in the world.
There you go. And talk about branding yourself, man. Jason Kelce, he's out in the parking lot with Bills Mafia. He is jumping out of the suite to hang out with some of the Bills fans. I don't know many dudes that could pull that off. I mean, his cool factor went way, way up. He's shirtless. He's yelling out when Travis scores. I think you might be right here, man. Jason Kelce might have been the superstar of the weekend. That was one heck of a performance. I just loved it. That just added to the excitement of that game, seeing Jason Kelce showing a lot of love for his brother and just enjoying life. He was living his best life out there.
Let's also be honest, man. Like, you, me, hanging in Vegas, Super Bowl week, we're out there for Yahoo. We're doing all sorts of work. If we were delivered to some tickets to like a party one night, and you look at the party invite and you're like, maybe. Like, you sort them, right? You're like, yes, maybe, no. If one comes from Jason Kelce, that's immediately to the top of the list, right? Like, that's immediately the, yes, we have to go from that.
Is he the guy, like, if you made a list of like dudes you'd want to sit in a bar and have a beer with, like, I think Charles Barkley has always been the guy. That's always been my answer. But Jason Kelce might be like number 2 at this point. Like, who wouldn't want to hang out with that guy? Like, what a treat he is on the sporting landscape. And I'm sad to see him retire, but I'm excited to see what comes next for Jason Kelce, man. He's everything. He's so much fun. He's great for the game.
Most important to me is, if he's not going to be playing on the field, then let's have him around the game. And the fact that he was already out there hanging out with Tay-Tay in the suite, watching his brother, reminds us that's going to happen.
He's the one dude that could get CBS to not show Tay-Tay every other time. They're like, actually, let's show Jason this time. Like, hey, didn't have to watch Taylor for 3 hours. We saw some Jason, too.
That beard looks strong, too. I mean, he brought it. All right, those were your playoff deliveries from the divisional round. Whatever you're into, from shopping to streaming, it's on Prime. Visit Amazon.com/Prime to get more out of whatever you're into. Hopefully, you're into hanging out with us continually, and we're not going anywhere. We got tons of football to keep breaking down. We're going to be back next Sunday with more Sunday Night Blitz, of course. Next weekend being championship weekend, it'll be your big Super Bowl preview. We'll tell you everything you need to know, including how, when, where, and why to just meet up with us and get weird in Vegas. We're going to make that happen. Charles McDonald will be back on Tuesday with the exempt list. You can leave us a voicemail, speakpipe.com/0blitz. Hang out with us. Tell us where you're partying in Vegas. Maybe we'll just crash your party. Follow us on Twitter at Yahoo Schwab, at Jason Fitz. Stone is at SJ Rochelle, our producer, doing God's work behind the glass. Leave us that 5-star review, rate, subscribe, tell your friends, family, enemies, tell everybody that they should be hanging out with us. We will be back next week with even more Sunday Night Blitz. Also, like, don't forget, Zero Blitz. Also, Zero Blitz. We've really basically just forced Frank to come into Zero Blitz. So every week on Thursdays, you should hang out with us for Zero Blitz. Also, that's Zero Blitz with Frank and Fitz, because it sounds better that way, even though I still think my name should have been first. We'll work on it. We're workshopping that.
We'll get there. Yeah.
Whatever your football needs are, make sure you're hanging out with us in the Zero Blitz podcast feed, and we'll get you everything that you need handled right then, right there. Have a good week, everybody. Thanks for hanging out with us.